Hello, bass family, and welcome to Everything Bass. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the musicians that helped shape me as a player, and you guys have been asking for more lists, which I like doing the lists. It's just my first focus in launching the channel was to do educational lesson type videos, but I did a couple lists already, and the response was really great. And you guys suggested some new ideas. And by the way, I would love for you to suggest what lists would you like me to cover, and it could be anything, top favorite live albums, you know, whatever. But today I decided to do the top 10 bass solos that changed my life, and I have notes because I'm old and I need notes. But what was my criteria for this? One is it had to be a solo within a song, not just a long solo. A lot of our bass heroes, they'll do an album and they'll just be a big unaccompanied solo, which are great. Those are great. But for criteria of this list, I chose a solo that fit within the context of a song. And that was about it. That's about the only criteria I had. I'm trying to present them in the order that I heard them as best as I could recall, and give you a little bit of information behind them. Hopefully you guys will find some new songs or new solos, maybe a new bass player you hadn't heard about, and you'll check them out. But most of these are iconic players, as you would imagine. And if I can, I will try to put YouTube links in the description below or in the comments below for every song, so you can hear them, because I didn't want to chop up this video by cutting away and playing the solos. So number one of my top 10 bass solos that changed my life, no surprise, from 1981's Moving Picture album, the band Rush, the bass player Geddy Lee, the song YYZ. This came along, let's see, that's 81. Yeah, I mean, I was just starting to play bass. Actually, not quite yet. I was a guitar player at the time. But I heard this, and that the section of trading off between Neil's playing and Geddy's playing, and how he, every time it came back to him, he evolved his solo, tried to do something different, incorporated harmonics. All this just really was, for a neophyte bass player, really, you know, again, when this came out, I wasn't a bass player. I started playing bass in 1984. But it really blew my mind. And it started kind of saying, okay, that's my watermark. That's what I want to do. That energy, that kind of dynamicism. Most of you guys will know the solo I'm talking about. But it really opened my eyes, and it also let me think of, like, wow, anything's possible on the bass. So that was kind of that first domino that fell that got me on this path of just trying to study everything bass. Number two, shortly thereafter, I worked at, in 1984, I worked at a guitar store in Chico, California, and people constantly were bringing in really cool recordings. I was really fortunate. My coworkers were just amazing musicians. And we had a record player that could play through the sound system. So guys would bring in records. And I remember one of the bass players brought in, or one of the co-workers, a salesman who was a bass player, brought in School Days by Stanley Clarke, the album. And that was originally recorded in 1979, but I didn't hear it back then. I wasn't aware of it until they put it on the turntable in the store. And the first song, School Days. Well, Stanley takes a solo in that. It started teaching me about, like, how to compose a solo, because if you guys remember, those of you familiar with the song, he starts with a simple little ba-na-na, just kind of plays a real thing, sustain, lets the thing breathe. Then he starts to take little pauses, and then he plays little bursts of notes, and he takes you somewhere, just like a story. You know, you go see a movie, and it's kind of setting up the plot, and then the action happens, and then there's a big climactic finish. That's how I heard the solo, and you know, I probably played it so much that I noticed one day that the record was no longer in the store, so I took the hint. But I was really fascinated with, he was not just going off and playing. He was really composing this thing and telling us a story with his bass solo, which I really loved. He's so fast, such a fast player, man. There's so much power. You can hear the power in his technique. Anyway. So that's a great solo, and that really moved me. Okay, now, this one's going to take a little bit of description, but my third solo that changed my life, bass solo, was from Steve Vai's song Blue Powder, featuring the amazing Stuart Hamm. The reason I say this is because it was included in Steve Vai's album Passion Warfare, which he released in 2009. But I had heard it years before, on a Flexi record, I believe. Yeah, it was a Flexi record that was in Guitar Player magazine. So Guitar Player used to do this thing where and they did it for, like, I want to say a year, but every issue you had this little vinyl, flexible vinyl thing. You tore it out, put it on your record player, put the needle on, and you got a free song, or included in the price of the magazine. And this song was there, and I was listening to it going, oh my gosh, you know, and there's these bass breaks, and they are so cool. And once again, I knew nothing about Stu at this time, but I was like, I need to know this man. I need to know this guy. This guy, I mean, I was just in my early infancy as a bass player, but I had, because of all the years of playing metal guitar, I liked like the power of his solo. And I like that it again, just like with Geddy Lee, every time the solo comes back, you know, because he plays a section, then there's a little groove, and he plays a section, and there's a groove. Every time it's giving you a different color, a different intensity. Some great two-hand tapping stuff, really cool. Starts with a great slap line. Anyway, so that's wonderful. You can hear it easily by just checking out Passion Warfare, and I would just get the entire album. I think that entire album is great. It's definitely one of my Desert Island discs. So Blue Powder, Stuart Hamm, man, love that. Really got me into slapping, tapping, all these solos really set is to break down barriers I was putting on myself. You know, I was in a very small world as a new bass player, like, oh, this is what a bass player does. But every time I heard this solo, a different solo, and I heard another solo, I started realizing the bass is limitless. It's limitless what you can do on the instrument. But you have to have an open mind, you know, and really listen to it. And looking at this list, there are a lot of different kinds of solos, and each one kind of broke down a barrier I'd put on myself. All right, my fourth favorite bass solo, and honestly, this was difficult because I wanted to honor this man, but he has so many great solos. And one a solo from that I talked about in another video that this gentleman did was also equally influencing. But this one I really spent years on, and I really tried to learn it. And I'm not there. I've got about half of it down, I think. And that is from the song Bach by Jeff Berlin. This was off his 1998 recording Pump It. And so it's C minor prelude, and Jeff does a rock reinterpretation, a reimagining of it, and takes what I think is one of his best solos ever. Oh my gosh, this solo. Same thing, you know, I remember buying the record. I bought his first record, which was Jeff Berlin Vox Humana Champion, and that one was awesome. And then so when Pump It came out, no doubt, I went to Tower Records, I bought the record, vinyl, put it on, and it similarly, it just knocked me on my butt. And what I realized listening to Jeff's playing is I wanted to make clean technique a priority. I wanted to play cleanly. At the time, I was mostly playing live. I was fortunate that within a week of getting my first bass, I was actually playing live shows. But when you play live and the energy and you're running around, and I'd go back and listen to recordings of our shows, I'd realize how sloppy I was. Listening to his solo on Bach and how clean everything is, how precise and just beautiful, and again, a really well-composed solo, I said, okay, that's it. I need to focus on my technique. And I took a long time and really broke down my technique, started recording every one of my practices, my solo practices, and going back and listening and saying, okay, that wasn't good enough. And just investing in that kind of quality is what got me to where I am today, where people, one of the most common comments I get is about my tone, and I'm honored by that. I'm thankful for that. Okay, so number 5, and this is in, again, the chronology of how I remember hearing them. So I just kind of discovered Jeff Berlin. Someone had told me, another employee, Gary Dunsmore, another guy I worked with at Music Pro, said, you got to check out the Dixie Dregs. So I got, one of the first albums I got was Unsung Heroes, which was released in 1981. The song Cat Food, spelled with a K, features a bass solo by Andy West. And there's a couple things. First of all, the solo is just well done. But it's also the first solo I can recall hearing where he had like an envelope filter on it. So it had a little bit of a wah sound. And that, again, started expanding my musicality, what I thought the bass could be. And I'm like, oh, wow, we can, because I had all these effects as a guitar player, but I never really thought of using them as a bass. A lot of my local influences, they seem to, they just plug in, and one guy would say, my only effect is a chord. And I appreciated that. But then hearing someone I respected so much of Andy West using a little bit of effect and creating some of this cool kind of sound, I just started taking my guitar pedals and plugging in and see which ones worked for bass. So again, I had limited myself with a narrow view of what the bass is, and all these solos were bringing them out, and I really appreciate it. Number 6, Stomp. by Brothers Johnson, of course, with the amazing, iconic Louis Johnson. And Stomp was, that album was recorded or released in 1980. We all know, well, I shouldn't say that, but if you're a slap bass guy, you probably have heard his amazing bass break in the song Stomp. And this again, at that point, my slapping was very octave based. I just played octaves. I played variations of octaves. I had good pocket, but I didn't really, I just kind of, limited to like really blocky type playing. And to hear old Thunder Thumbs just go at it like this, and with the intensity and the fire and the passion, I used to always say, oh yeah, he's a heavy metal funk bass player, because he was not no mamby-pamby, disco bass player. He is heavy metal, man. This guy had power and intensity. And this song informed me for many years about like how to craft a slap bass solo, and keeping that. I like, if you guys haven't heard it, check it out after watching this video. But I liken it to sometimes when like Neil Peart would take a drum solo and he'd set up a groove and he's doing variations, but that groove stays. Louis Johnson does the same thing. He establishes this groove and he's doing these variations and stuff, but it's just got so much energy and passion behind it. I just love that. So that's my number 6, Stomp. Number 7 is Elephant Gun from Eat 'Em and Smile, David Lee Roth solo album, 1986, featuring amazing Billy Sheehan. Yeah, it's funny when I thought, okay, now I remember, looking at this list, I'm like, wow, I remember Billy just so many times, Billy just, his Talus stuff, all that. But it was this solo that really kind of pushed me into new directions. Again, about composing solos. And right now, if you compare like Billy's solo, which starts with just a really, rapid 16th notes and really cool legato runs and stuff, he gets out of the gate running at full speed. That's a choice, and that creates an emotion. We need to make our choices as musicians because they create or they convey an emotion, or they're telling a story. We can't just do it because it's a cool thing we learned in the bedroom. It has to have a purpose. Now, if you compare Billy coming out of the gate, just going with this like single line or single note thing, and then starting to play around, and he kind of evolves from there, but he's going 100 miles an hour at the beginning, with say Stanley Clarke's compositional style for School Days, where he starts and he grows it. One's not wrong, one's not the only way. They're both cool, but they both have a purpose. So Billy's thing was he didn't want all. I mean, if you guys know the song, which you don't, if you don't, listen to it. Check out the bass line, not the solo, the bass line. He's playing the single note line that is so friggin' fast, and it's perfect for the song. It's perfect for the groove. But he didn't want to lose that. He has established this thing. So when his solo comes, he takes and evolves that idea into the solo. And oh my gosh, it's just great. And I love the way Steve comes back in towards the end of it. I think it's just a brilliant solo. And I think something you guys would enjoy hearing. Number 8, Cruise Missile from the album The Introduction, Steve Morse Band. So Steve Morse decided there's enough with the Dixie Dregs. He wanted to take a break from that. I shouldn't say enough because he later did, but he took a break from Dixie Dregs, did the Steve Morse Band, featuring the amazing Dave LaRue Jerry Peak. I'm sorry, Jerry. That was stupid of me to say. It's Jerry Peak. Jerry Peak, amazing bass player from this band, this version of the band, because later Dave LaRue did replace him. But there's no replacing you, Jerry. You're a genius. So being a Dixie Dregs fan, I saw that, hey, this album came out, and I read about it in Guitar Player magazine, went down and bought The Introduction. Put it on. The first song, Cruise Missile, comes out, and holy socks, man, Jerry, where have you been all my life, buddy? So it was released in 1984. I heard it in 1984. I heard it the week after it came out. I was able to buy an album of it, and Jerry's soloing in this is so great. What drew me to it is a little different tone. So if you listen to it, I started hearing like, okay, well, that's a cool tone to get. He again using kind of that developing, letting a lot of air happen, some harmonics happen, and then kind of developing the line, but taking us somewhere. And listen to how he gets out of the solo. So if you've ever been working on a solo for a song and you just can't figure out like, well, how do I get back into the song that makes sense? This is a great one to study. Listen to how he did it. Listen to how the band came in and what they did. I can also say that about the previous with Elephant Gun. If we sometimes work at the beginning of our solos we think about the beginning, but sometimes we don't think how to get out of there. It's like a great writer writing a great mystery, but can't figure out how to solve his own mystery. Crafting a way out of an exit out of the solo is just as important. And I'm saying this also about non-crafted solos in improv. Always try to find a way in improv to land the plane, if you will. And if you need an example, check out Cruise Missile with Jerry Peak. Okay, number 9. We're almost through the list. Number 9. At this point, I'm a student at MI, and it's funny because when I heard this, it was 1989, and yet it's the oldest recorded solo on the entire list because I had not been exposed to a lot of jazz playing. Again, I narrowed it. I put some boundaries on. This is the kind of bass player we got. I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to listen to this. And going to MI, one of the best things about going to MI is all that was shattered. I started appreciating all styles of music, and all styles of music really helped me become the player I am today. So through this process, I learned about this recording, and this song is "Someday My Prince Will Come" from Bill Evans Trio's 1960 release, Portrait in Jazz. And this features my favorite upright bass player of all time, Scott LaFaro. Man. A couple things. This is in 3/4, so hearing the solo on upright and hearing it in 3/4, how he did it. At this point, I was needing help because I hadn't played jazz before, and I'm at the school that was, even though at the time I never thought, oh, it's a rock school. It was not a rock school. Most of the stuff was jazz, and I went with it, and I'm glad I did. And by doing that, in one of the classes, we did a critical listening on this solo, and I can still remember it. I remember going, okay, here's another upright bass solo, and I wasn't getting like the intricacies of jazz soloing. I didn't understand it. I was still measuring it against my favorite rock solos, which now you guys know what they are. I was kind of using those. And this solo by Scott LaFaro like shook me. I was like, that was amazing. And I remember I had no money. Just like most students, I had no money. And so I remember going to a place called the Record Warehouse in Hollywood and trading in like cassettes to get the cassette of this because I wanted it so badly. And man, then I started listening to Scott's playing on the rest of the album. But it was this song that was the gateway drug to me discovering two things. Specifically Scott LaFaro and how much I love his playing. And secondly, jazz and how wonderful it is that it really opened me up. It opened up my musicianship, and I have to say I became a better funk bass player, a better studio bass player. I became a better everything bass player because I studied jazz. So if you find yourself with the same kind of like, oh, I don't want to do that, that sounds like noise to me, I'd encourage you to try some of these things. Like just listen to this song. And yes, everyone thinks of "Someday My Prince Will Come" as a Disney tune, but just listen to the song and listen to Scott's playing on it, and then just try some different things. Look for other lists on like best jazz bass solos of all time. I'm sure you'll find a ton of lists on YouTube or on the net, and check them out and just listen to them and try to like really appreciate it. If you have trouble understanding it because you haven't really studied some of the harmonies that jazz incorporates, just stick with the channel. Everything bass. I'm going to be progressing. I've already done videos for all the common triads and seventh chords, going through the modes. There's going to be play-along tracks to get your improvisation together. And of course, that's going to morph into jazz. So maybe I can be the guy that opens that door to you because it's a wonderful world, man. Jazz music is great. And it's funny because just as we say rock, but there's all these sub-genres of rock, when you say jazz, there's incredible subgenres of jazz. Latin jazz, there's fusion jazz, bebop, all these crazy styles that are really fun to experience, and I promise you will make you a better bass player. All right, so we're at the end of the list, and this is because of this particular chronology. This was the most recent I had heard, and still I had heard it in the late 90s. But it's funny, when I first put the list together, I started thinking, okay, what are my 10 favorite bass solos? This was like the second one I wrote down. And that's how important it was to me. But chronologically, I heard Maxwell Murder by Rancid on the album And Out Comes the Wolves from 1995. And I think I heard it around 99, I think. Generally that area. So it'd been out for a couple of years, and a student brought it in and said, hey, can you teach me this song? I'm like, let's give it a shot. So I put it on and listened to it. And the bass line, by the way, I love the bass line. Matt, genius, man. Just the bass line. Let's take the solo out for a second, just the bass line, and listen to it and go, man, I mean, that's a fun bass line, really cool, and we worked on it. But then came the solo, and I remember listening to the solo, and the students like, yeah, yeah, and I'm listening going, yeah, I'm not going to teach you that, man. And I even later actually got a transcription of the solo from a gentleman I trust who's great, and I didn't help. This is such a great solo. I just love it. There's so much energy. I've heard guys do it without a pick because Matt plays it with a pick. And yeah, you can do it without a pick. But there's that sound, man, and that energy he had. Now, in the link below, I'm going to put a YouTube link of not the studio recording, although he plays the solo pretty much the same. But they give him more time, and he actually gets to go farther. So I'm going to put that version because in researching this, I always wanted to make sure that there was a YouTube link I could put so that you could hear these guys, the solos I'm talking about. But in this one, I want to do the live version because I was just, I mean, it was just brought me so much joy. I'm listening to this, like, okay, cool, maybe I'll use this version. And then he starts going beyond the solo that I know. And it was just like, oh, you're the best. Matt, you're great. And you're a man of such great integrity, too. Being in the musical instrument side of the industry, I hear great stories about you and how good you are to work with. And anyway, I just appreciate this. I think it's great. I think the whole album's great. But in particular, check out Maxwell Murder. It's also a very short song, and they give him such a great bass solo. So you got a good teammates there, Matt. So that's my top 10 bass solos that changed my life. And that's not an overstatement. Every time when I hear a new solo, maybe it changed my life because I practiced harder. Maybe it changed my life because it introduced me to some new concepts and freshened up my playing. Maybe it just made my life happier and that changed my life. Because all these are guilty and what a great list of bass players. I'm probably going to do a Spotify playlist on my Spotify account. And if I do, I'll put it in the link below. So you guys can, at least if you just want a one-stop shop, hear them all. So that's my list. I don't have an encore item. I usually don't do encore items for lists, but I wanted to reach out to you guys. I'm recording this on April 4th, 2020, and the coronavirus has pretty much halted the world, and everyone's sheltering in place, and there's a lot of people affected by this. And I just wanted to say that I came up with the concept of this channel at the end of 2019. Coronavirus wasn't even on anyone's mind. Probably should have been, but and I wanted to not only teach lessons on YouTube, but also create a family of bass players by utilizing social networks and YouTube. That bass players had a place to chat and to come. And share ideas. And right now, with all of us, pretty much our gigs have all stopped, and we're not able to move around, and we're not able to get together and even just improvise with friends. For musicians, that's really hard. So I implore you, I beg of you, use this platform. In the comments below on this YouTube video, how's it going? I'm asking for a welfare check. How are you guys doing? Please don't think it's silly. I don't want to push you out of your comfort zone, but just comment below and let's share some ideas. Maybe I'll kick it off. I'll share some ideas in the comments when I post the video, which will be, I'm not going to, because I have a backlog of videos. When I record on one Saturday, it's a couple weeks before they go up. I just always want to have a backlog just in case there's a problem, I have a technical issue or something. I never want to go a weekend without posting videos. But this, on lists, I usually post them within a day or so of shooting them. So how's it going? How are you guys doing? If you're frustrated, be frustrated. It's okay to feel. It's okay to feel, but it's not okay to do it alone. So if you are someone sheltered in place and you're alone, or the people you're with aren't you don't feel particularly close to, whatever the situation is, we are your family. You guys are my brothers and sisters, and a couple of you are crazy uncles. I also encourage you to join our Facebook page. There's a Facebook page. Just go to Facebook and search Everything Bass with Dale Titus. And just follow it. Just click the follow and announce yourself. Don't be alone. I try to keep it light. and try to post inspirational memes. I try to share videos, concepts. But right now, I think it's more important that the vehicle is used so you guys can be heard. How's it going? How are you passing your time? Anyway, I just don't, I'm really hurting because I'm lucky enough I'm here with my awesome wife and daughter. And I have friends that I can communicate through Zoom and texting and my social network. And I'm inviting you into that because it's helping me. This isn't an easy situation for anyone. And if anyone says it is, I question that. There's no time for egos. This is hard for everyone. So I'm just asking, don't be alone. And I promise you, if you just join in, even if you don't want to specifically talk about what you're going through, but you just join in on a conversation, I'm going to be posting daily questions like, what's your favorite this? What's your favorite this? And just join in. And sometimes just seeing that and seeing what a great group of guys and girls we have. And they're all over the world. And the subscribers to this channel, we just picked up a new subscriber from Ireland. And I had a brief communication with him through direct message, and how he's getting on. By the way, he stopped playing for like 14 years, if I remember right. And because he's sheltered in place and he's jumping back into the instrument, and he's using this network to help him get back into it. So welcome, man. Glad to have you. Don't be alone. And it's an open forum. So the only thing I say is be respectful. This is definitely a time not to, if someone posts something and for some reason you think it's stupid, don't do that. This is never a time for that. We just need to support each other because we are a family. Bass players are a family. I love my family. I've dedicated my entire life, most of my entire life. I'm 54 now. I started playing when I was 18. All that time I've dedicated to bass, and I just love talking with bass players and sharing with bass players, and it hurts that you might be hurting. So don't let that happen. Please join in the family. Sit at our table. Let's chat. We will get through this, guys. I love you so much. Let me know, what's your list of top favorite bass solos of all time that are in a song, not a solo by itself, because I could have done some. Stu Hamm did some unaccompanied solos. Billy Sheehan did a rare unaccompanied solo that Steve Vai transcribed for Guitar Player magazine. But right now, just what are your favorite 10 solos? And please share them in the comments below, because that will give me something to do while I'm isolated at home. I love you guys. And thank you for being my family. See ya.